going to show you some things today that are going to blow your mind. Images, artifacts, and sacred temples, Hindu temples, that go against archaeological and historical falsehoods. Stay tuned for a mind-blowing episode of Dark Enlightenment.
Thinking about the first time that we met, thinking about the time when you hosted, laughing at the good time that we had, even time when sorrow made us sad. Reminisce on us, wish we had.
This is the Dark Enlightenment with your host MARKSSIUS Hill, aka House Hill, the 2-3 of MCs. Welcome to Enlightenment. Peace.
Think about it, 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 think about it.
House Hill with Dark Enlightenment on India and how its narrative, its culture, its artifacts just don't agree with archaeologists and historians. They just can't fit India into a box. First, starting with their religion. Hinduism is the world's oldest religion. And let's not forget, India was called Hindustan all the way up until 1947. You heard me right. They changed the name of India in 1947 from Hindustan to India. Hindustan means the land of the Hindus. So you can see why some people wanted that name changed. But let's still keep in mind, India is 80% Hindu. So what can we glean from that? A small few have a big hand on the levels of power in India. The religious aspect brings in these marvelous temples, and that's where the disagreement comes in a lot when it comes to India and history.
Oh, when we look at this temple, we can see the magnificence, the artistry, its sheer size, its scale, the magnitude of the construction. It's merely something we can't do today. History can't explain it. Technology can't explain it. We can't do this today. So, once again, history is not agreeing with Indian artifacts and historical stone artifacts. Here we have Praveen Mohan exhibiting the fact that he found a dinosaur sculpted into this temple. This temple is supposedly thousands of years old. Dinosaurs have been extinct, or we suppose they've been extinct. So, how is this dinosaur in this temple? You can see him pointing out that the neck is much thicker than the normal camel. Also, the ear placement, the eye structure, the socket. Also, you can see how thick the lower body is. This is definitely not a camel. It definitely looks like the structure of a dinosaur, what today we would call a dinosaur, a prehistoric animal that existed millions of years ago. Not agreeing at all with history in this depiction. Once again, there's another anomaly. In the rock, you can see the discoloration of one side and the other side. One side seems much more aged than the other side. If you take a closer look, you can see the rock structure is different. This temple was supposedly built in the last 600 years. Dinosaurs supposedly existed 65 million years ago. Human beings were said to have existed on this planet 1 million years ago. This is a carving from a Hindu temple called Ta Prohm in Cambodia. You can clearly see what we think looks like a dinosaur. You can clearly see bone structure on the back. You can see the long snout. This is not a rhinoceros. This is not any type of animal that existed besides what we see in skeletal remains of dinosaurs. Even if you can reconstruct these dinosaurs with the skeletal remains, that would take a high degree of technology to reconstruct its muscle tissue and its outer tissue to show the actual structure of the animal. So once again, this is a big time anomaly when we begin to talk about Indian artifacts sketched in stone temples. History is not correlating with what we are taught today. This is a dinosaur that is today called a Stegosaurus, and you can clearly see the similarities in the structure of the animal. Experts say this temple was built 800 years ago. And we can once again see the sheer magnitude, the structure, the artistry in the structure, the intricate details in this humongous temple. Once again, today we will not be able to duplicate this design. As far as monetarily, it would break a lot of budgets to even attempt to try to design something like this and have it made. It seems as though these temples were built millions of years ago, not the hundreds that they're giving us now, the hundreds of years ago. These temples show erosion and they show deterioration in the details that would indicate that they have been around a far longer time than hundreds of years ago. How could any architect, builders design and build something like this only hundreds of years ago when we can't duplicate it today? Once again, now scientists and archaeologists would have us to believe that humans were evolved into our current state over 1,000,000 years ago, and that's as far back as we existed. But we see these 65 million-year-old animals, these dinosaurs, carved right here in these temples. It's not correlating with the history we were taught at all. And so for me to believe in the archaeology, the historical view that we've been presented so far, it would not allow me to believe what we've been taught so far when we have this type of evidence that humans have been around far longer than 1,000,000 years, which they teach us is our evolution as far back as 1,000,000 years. This is unexplained. It can't be explained. And archaeologists and historical preachers alike will not present these images to you. There is no solid way to date these rocks. Radiocarbon dating won't apply. We can only date the bones. And the bones are the skeletal remains we find of fossilized dinosaurs. When we find these, we can actually carbon date them. So if we can carbon date the dinosaur to 65 million, but we come up with an imaginary, mysterious number of 600 years for this magnificent temple, once again, you see there is a big time discrepancy in the history. How are these sculptures existing? How are they explained? Are they covered up? We can see that they are in the weeds. They are very obscured. So no one would really notice a dinosaur sitting on a supposedly 600-year-old temple, which I would guess is millions of years old. When you look at the magnificence of the structure, the details and the design in the sculptures, all of the artistry put into this temple. There are no inscriptions in this temple. The inscriptions for this temple are applied to the other temple. They are assuming that these builders existed around the same time. The logic used in dating these temples is even flawed. The oral history for these temples outdates what the modern day teachings are about these temples. The locals and their local oral tradition states that these temples are millions of years old. Here you'll see an ancient horse that was mentioned in their ancient script. This horse was mentioned, and its importance lies in the fact that this animal has more ribs than the modern day horse. Therefore, this horse existed many thousands of years ago along with humans, is what this sculpture is telling us, and is what their ancient texts tell us also. If we are to believe the modern day his story, then we would be lost when we can clearly see what's here in stone. And you can see sculptures with human beings riding these supposedly extinct horses. They were supposedly extinct when human beings were around. Now, human beings would not be riding these horses if we were to believe the history we've been given. The timeline of human history is something that we cannot say is positively, definitely what it is. We cannot definitely verify that these are the facts. We can't go along with the timeline of human history based on the artifacts, based on the sculptures, based on the temple work, based on the artistry in the temples, which clearly shows a different timeline of history with human beings in accordance with animals and other events. But we're going to just focus on the animals at this point. If we look at these images etched in stone, what conclusion do we come up with? Do we believe the modern day timeline that humans evolved only 1,000,000 years ago when we see sculptures with animals that are millions of years old along with human beings? I mean, who do we believe? Do we believe erroneous logic, or do we believe what's sketched in stone? That's the true question. Here we have the Tila temple, and once again you can see the sheer magnitude of the artistry of the architecture. The structure is huge and once again has detailed sculptures all around. Now, we've just come up recently with this technology, to whereas if there's an earthquake, the structure won't totally be destroyed. It can withstand the rigors of an earthquake. So how was this technology employed in the construction of this temple? We have an anomaly. We have an anomaly once again, ladies and gentlemen, with the history and the actual stone proof. This temple has vertical shafts going at least 75 feet below it to help with the impact of earthquake. This temple was excavated by a government archeologist, just like the Smithsonian and other government entities that we have here in the United States. They took the artifacts, and who knows what they got out of there. Who knows what technology was in those temples, just the same as the artifacts that have been found in the temples here, the mounds here, the great structures that were built in supposedly ancient times, which I also believe are millions of years old. The government archaeologists that excavated this temple stated that this temple was built by extraterrestrials. That's right, aliens, beings that are not terrestrial to this planet, that are not from this planet, whatever you want to call them. That's what he said built this temple. And the reason he said that is because of the artifacts that were found, the ones that were shown to be found. There's no telling, like I said before, what else was found here. Because if you are showing the public this, what made this sculpture, I'm sure made other things besides stone figures. There may have been technology. There may have been a Stargate. There may have been relics that can perform supernatural feats. You never know what's in these temples. Look at the grand scale and the design of this. So magnificent, it will lead you to believe that what's inside is magnificent. And he found this below the structure. These artifacts and relics, these that resemble extraterrestrial beings. This figure, which was found at this site, was removed from the museum that it was placed in. I wonder why. I would suppose that it's because it looks like an extraterrestrial. Azara is the being who is supposedly credited with building these magnificent structures and other advanced structures. He was said to be an alien being, not from this world, which is very believable when you look at what's been done here. I mean, I can't say the word magnificent enough. It's a marvel when you look at these things. If you can actually see them in person, I can only imagine the feelings and the visual stimulation that it would inspire. These structures are otherworldly. Here we have rock paintings depicted not far from that temple discovered by another archaeologist, which clearly show beings with helmets on, antennas, various, it seems like some type of technical items in their hands, some type of technology in their hands, and it's clearly not a human. And why would these people be making art of these beings? Did this just come out of their head? It's not very likely that they would just be spending their time making these visions unless it was something that was important to them, that they wanted people to see. Like, man, this happened. Look at what I saw. Not only are aliens depicted, but also their craft that they may have traveled in. Kindi is the name of the village where these wall paintings, this artistry was depicted. And here you can see a spacecraft. This is located in southern India. These paintings that we're showing now are 800 miles away from the location previously where these type of images were found. If you look at the painting, you can see the animal figures are below, while the spacecraft figure is up above them. For it to be ancient art depicted by primitive human beings, this art really shows the three-dimensional space well. As we can see the sky above and the animals below, and it seems just like a nice naturescape painted by supposedly primitive human beings. But I don't think they were so primitive at all. And I think they were depicting exactly what they saw and exactly how they saw it in these wall paintings. Cave paintings have been discovered long ago and have been around for millions of years. These were supposedly done by those who did not even have the will, did not have metal tools, did not have knowledge of construction to build houses. Primitive men. Okay, we can see a round structure. We also see what we can assume to be humanoid or some type of figures that resemble humanoids inside. Is spherical, meaning is round, and you can see these round circles within the circumference of the circle going all the way around the craft. This is not a house. It's round. We didn't live in houses. It's not a cave. And if it was a cave, how would it have these circles around it that resemble lights that we see on current depictions of what we call UFOs or unidentified flying craft? Here he's found some more paintings, wall paintings, and they do not look like human beings. We can compare them to wall paintings with actual human figures on them with the normal amount of arms and legs, and it looks like a humanoid figure. When you continue on and look at the other pictures, this does not look humanoid at all. If humans began to walk upright 200,000 years ago, then how can you explain these depictions? And then we see 10,000 years after we started walking upright, we see a definite shoot up in technology, in development, in progress of the human species. All of a sudden, right when we see that we may have had interactions with those outside of our planet that may have taught us and advanced us in a very rapid manner. The catalyst for the human development could very well be extraterrestrial. We can see this theory of extraterrestrial intervention for rapid development of the human species all around the world. Everywhere you see these pyramids, these mounds, and you also had artifacts scattered about and below these mounds and pyramids and various structures, temples. You have these artifacts that may have been confiscated and never will be seen again. All around the world, you can see this development, and you can see these same structures, and you can see these same figures depicted, these alien-like figures, wall paintings, sculptures, all throughout the world. There definitely was some type of intervention in human development, which disagrees with the history we've been taught, that we came from apes and we evolved according to Darwin. This is all a farce. These are all lies. You can clearly see, if you look, if you try to discover what's been hidden from you, you can clearly see that we were not the first people here. There were people here millions of years ago. And therefore, you cannot trust the timeline, the history that we've been given. The archaeologists,
The historians and the archaeologists, they can't explain these things. These temples are so magnificent. The people of India have a lot to be proud of, boasting the world's oldest religion, holding their culture together, although there have been pillagers and people who have stole their culture. But India has millions of temples. That's right, millions of temples. We don't even compare when it comes to churches, here in the United States. These are stone temples. Some of these temples built from the top down, rock cut and removed with no traces of the rock, but the temple magnificently decorated, detailed. The artistry in these temples, it's almost unexplainable, and it is unexplainable for archaeologists and historians. What can they say when you have a dinosaur in a temple, or you have a man riding a bicycle in a temple that they say was built?
This is the Patavani Swani Temple in India, which depicts, get this, a man on a bicycle. The bicycle was supposedly invented in the 1800s. Now, this ancient temple is said to be about 2,000 years old, which I think, once again, is incorrect. I think all of these temples are possibly millions of years old. Some people may say, this isn't a bike. Maybe he's on a wooden depiction of something else, or they will try to make this not a bike. They will try to make this stone sculpture not real. It's sitting here clear as day in a temple that's supposedly 2,000 years old. Now, if the timeline is off for this, even if we say this temple is 2,000 years old, how is it that this man is sitting here on this bike, which was supposedly invented in the 1800s? The bike has been through an evolution of development, so it is a significant invention. It is a significant advancement in technology for human beings. Some would say that this temple was built 100 years ago. Okay, explain how the hell they did that. And who did it? You can't. Once again, they will try to make up all types of excuses to dismiss this etching in stone. We will have some that will say this column, this stone was put here recently, but as you can see, it's connected to the total column that's connected to the temple itself. It is a whole stone piece. So for you to have something newer added to this temple, first you would have to shave the rock down to make the angles fit correctly and to make it a smooth surface. Then you would begin to etch into the stone, and then you would have to shave it off to match again. And then even at that, there would be discoloration of the stone because one part of the stone would be newer than the other part of the stone. So the fact that this pillar is connected to the temple itself, somebody snuck in and etched this man on a bike, I think it's a ludicrous notion. This bike was here, it's been here for at least 2,000 years. And for what I think has been millions of years. There have been texts and historians that have recorded this temple throughout the centuries. The earliest mention of it is in the 7th century, which makes this temple at least almost about 1,500 years old. And once again, I think it's very much older than that. But there you have it. The reason archaeologists and historians come out with these theories based in mystery instead of logic, they come up with these hypotheses not based in logic, is because it doesn't match up with their picture. His story is his story. The history is here in stone. Don't believe his story. Don't believe his timeline. Don't believe his history.
My logic tells me that these temples are maybe millions of years old. Sometimes you can even see the difference in what's been added in the original structure, because the rock is a different color and the erosion is different on different sections. But who wouldn't want to add to these magnificent structures that already existed in India and are still being uncovered and discovered? India just won't agree with history. India brings into question the how and the when, especially the when. Shouts out to Praveen Mohan for this extraordinary visual evidence that he took his time and his efforts to find and seek out. Please go subscribe to him if you get a chance. Brilliant creator. Shouts out to you, man. Keep up the good work. Dark Enlightenment out. A lot of the temples show stories, which also relate to Hindu texts. The earliest known sacred texts of Hinduism, the Vedas, date back to at least 3000 BCE. Some date back even further, 8000, 6000 BCE. And some Hindus themselves believe these texts to be of divine origin and therefore timeless, just like these temples. There is no one that could speak for the Hindus as a whole, and no single authority regarding what is truly Hindu or none. There are principles nevertheless. Belief in the divinity of the Vedas, belief in one all-pervasive supreme reality, belief in the cyclical nature of time, belief in karma, belief in reincarnation, belief in the ultimate realities with higher beings, belief in enlightened masters or gurus, belief in non-aggression or non-injury, belief that all revealed religions are essentially correct, belief that the first living and foremost is a spiritual entity, belief that the living being is first and foremost a spiritual entity. The Vedas are the oldest Hindu sacred texts and have the most wide-ranging authority. They are believed to have been written anywhere from 18 to 12 BCE. The Upanishad described a more philosophical and theoretical approach to the practice of Hinduism and were written roughly between 8 and 400 BCE, around the same time that the Buddha supposedly lived and taught. The Mahabharata is the longest epic poem in the world, the most well-known portion of which is the Bhagavad Gita, which is perhaps his best known, widely cited book in all of Hinduism. The Ramayana is another most important epic poem in Hinduism. Some of the most important deities in Hinduism: Ganesha, Krishna, Sarasvati, Durga, and Kali. There's soldiers out there always bringing us dark enlightenment. And being part of the melanated community, they've had their history tampered with. They've had the names of their people tampered with. They've had the names of their lands tampered with. This is a continuing, ongoing process with imperialism, and when you consider certain people to be more superior than others. India even has a problem of colorism, with its caste system segregating and discriminating against certain colors of people in its land. Just like anywhere, you have good and bad, good and evil. Pick your side. It's come to a point now where this history These artifacts aren't all hidden.
Why do the Nazca
They can't get to
300
millions
wide
of temples. They can't unearth all the mounds that are buried, all the pyramids that are buried. They can't get rid of all of this stuff. So it's come to a point now to where we just have to look. We just have to show. And then we have to be aware. We have to be conscious. So when they try to hide this information, and you have people, you have soldiers out here bringing things to light that you should know to keep you from being mentally enslaved, it's your responsibility to look, listen, and learn if you're not distributing this information yourself. Thanks for watching another episode of Dark Enlightenment with your boy House Hill. We're going to keep bringing you information to broaden your consciousness and to open your spirit up to new things. The conclusion here is, who do we believe? Do we believe archaeologists? Do we believe historians? When we have proof like this, when we have things showing us, everything isn't what it seems. We can't even believe half of what we've been taught, of what we've been told to be true. The timeline of history. When did humans actually exist? Did humans exist along with dinosaurs? Were dinosaurs extinct? Did humans exist alongside of them? Or was this just a visionary, just thinking up things? You have to come to your own conclusion, but my conclusion is, I don't believe the historical timeline. I don't believe the archaeologists. I can't. With proof like this in stone, it's impossible for me as a logical human to go along with this story, his story that they've given us. Until next time, Enlightenment family. Shouts out to my Indian brothers and sisters. Congratulations on your culture. Till next time, Dark Enlightenment, House Hill. Peace. Dark Enlightenment, House Hill, Ebony Indians episode. Go check that out when you get a chance. How the name of America was once India, and how that affected the indigenous Niji that were there already on the continent. Check that out. It seems that there may have been Indians on every continent. Dark-skinned, melanated people who were wiped out, eradicated in one way or the other, or their identities were totally changed. Just the same story, same song over and over again. Seems to be a playbook. We know this playbook quite well already.
India does not agree with his story.
India doesn't agree with his story.
India doesn't agree